views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Summertime is here and we might just want to take a little trip out to City Island and have some dinner. But one of the things that has come up any number of times is that there's a lot of noise across the bay from City Island. And as you know, noise is one of the biggest issues when in 311 calls. People call 311, they call more about noise than any other issue. But guess what? If you're at City Island, you could call about noise coming from Rodman's Neck all the time, because it is, as you probably know, an NYPD shooting range and FDNY training range, and it makes a heck of a lot of noise. If you don't believe me, take a look. And this is what it sounds like. That video is provided to us by one of our guests this evening. And I think they've kind of had enough. You want a nice dinner and sit on the shoreline at City Island and, have a nice peaceful time. Well, guess what? You're going to hear that. So let's introduce our guests. Let's first say good evening to Barbara Dolensek, who is the City Island Civic Association Vice President. Nice to have you with us, Barbara.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And a board member of the City Island Rising in the 45th Precinct Council is John Doyle. John, nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Gary.
And the president of the 45th Precinct Community Council is Bob Bieder. Nice to have you with us.
Always a pleasure, Gary. Thank you.
And I did promise you that we would make sure to mention Westchester Square Plumbing and Heating Supply. That is Bob's company. And look, you want to shop Bronx. You want to look for a water heater and plumbing supplies and all those other things. That's where you go. Is that good, Bob? We got you in there?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. We're all friends, except when it comes to Rodman's Neck. What do we do with Rodman's Neck? Let's get some of the background. Barbara Dolensek, talk to us a little bit about the deep history of this. This is not the first conversation that we've had about Rodman's Neck, is it?
No, we've been talking about this for years. It's always been a military facility since the beginning of the 20th century. It was during the First World War. It was a naval training station and so forth. But the police department didn't really take it over full time until 1960. My husband and I moved 2,000 feet away from it in 1977, and we had no idea that this was a big deal. My husband used to go over, he was a veterinarian at the zoo, he used to go over and take care of the bomb squad dogs and also to do a little practice shooting himself. It was not very loud, but then toward the end of the 1980s, it became extremely loud. There were more police officers, they had to certify more often, they had louder guns. And so we put a lot of pressure on on our local elected officials, who went to bat for us to a point. It's a long story. We ended up trying to sue the city. The city backed off and said, we'll do sound abatement. Would that make everything okay? And we said, oh, sure. Within a year, I have a letter from David Dinkins promising sound abatement within a year. That was written in 1994.
I have to interject because I can see all the screens. Bob Bieder is laughing. And when you said that noise abatement, I started to laugh because obviously I've been covering this stuff for a long time and we're still waiting. But go ahead.
And we're still waiting and we're still waiting. And it happens every so often. Yes. They did some testing here. Cerami Associates did testing and they discovered that it was illegally loud by city standards. And so they said, well, we'll come up with an idea. So they said, we need the money for a temporary, for a sound abatement thing on one of the ranges. And of course, it didn't work. And so they said,
so let's just be clear. They use it for training. They use it for shooting practice. I know they detonate, which is just, you can't even believe it. But when they collect all the explosives, the illegal fireworks that they collect, that's where they blow them up.
Right.
And it's literally like setting off bombs. You live across the water now from it.
I do.
Is it constant? I mean, if we were to ask you to walk out to your window, I don't want you to do that right now, but if we walked out to your window, would we presumably be able to hear it? I mean, is it's that often and that intrusive?
Well, it runs hot and cold. I mean, one day Clyde Haberman from the New York Times came out to interview me on my porch about the noise from the range, and it was quiet as a mouse. Luckily, the planes into LaGuardia were awful, so we had a lot to write about. But the bomb squad, by the way, is a totally different operation over there. We were told at one point that the Rodman's Neck firing range would be moved to Queens with the police academy.
I'm going to review
and John
that.
was able to find out from Commissioner Bratton that in fact was not going to happen at all. But the bomb squad was never going to move. And in fact, I had the bomb squad, the head of the bomb squad, came to my house to test blowing up certain kinds of bombs and how loud they could be and what we could tolerate. And when my windows didn't break and my dogs didn't go into,
they said, "Oh, okay, that's good." Yeah.
They said, "Okay, we can use these." I mean, but he was amazed at the sound from the firing range. And I said, "You hear it all the time," and he said, "I know, but I expect to."
Let's get to Bob Bieder, and Bob, let's talk a little bit about from the police department's point of view. And listen, we need policing. We need them to have the facilities. We certainly need them to have the training. We know what the notion of police and guns means, and we've got to make sure they know what they're doing. What do they need? And, where do you stand? I mean, you're a community guy, and you've always been a community guy, yet you're on the precinct council. Talk to me from the police point of view. What do they need that they have to do at Rodman's Neck?
Well, let me start by saying, first of all, I am a police community council, and I have to stress the community. The 45th Precinct Community Council, not the 45th Precinct Council. We're there for the community first.
Okay, that's fair.
That's very important to understand. Community councils are there to help the relationship between the police and the community. But by the same token, it's also a place where the community comes out and can hear and have their complaints heard in a public forum where the commanding officer is there. And, it's an ideal situation to really give people an opportunity to say what's on their mind. Usually the press is present. It's an important council for community, though.
So what is the dialogue like?
As far as police is concerned,
yeah.
As far as police is concerned, yes, we frequently support police in many ways, but that's not our main purpose. Our main purpose is to support the community. So what is
the dialogue about when it comes to Rodman's Neck?
Well, let's talk about that next, okay? So with Rodman's Neck specifically, the dialogue has been for many years about the noise. The police, we've toured the site. The three of us on here have been to the site. It's a disgrace. The roads are horrible. The conditions they're shooting under year-round are horrible. The training grounds, they have a city street set up that's a mess, but they're working out of trailers. There's nothing really there that's a professional training site that should be.
And you know what? We would all sympathize, certainly, with our police officers.
Absolutely, the officers
they deserve a real facility of New York and the NYPD training facilities.
That's correct.
The
NYPD deserves better. What happens often is you have other agencies that come out and train there. Unfortunately, the only agency that's paying for it is the city. You have state and federal agencies that train there too. So
I
we're
mean, there
not
was
getting
a
any money
story-
from the other agencies.
There was a story, Bob, that Connecticut was sending police officers to
Yeah,
use the
we
facility.
get training from a lot of different places. I mean, primarily it is NYPD training, but other agencies should be throwing in something. You know?
Unbelievable.
So that's a big part of it.
In your mind, the next we're going to go to John Doyle and ask him about the specifics of the whole Queens thing. In your mind, the whole idea should have been move the whole thing to a real indoor facility or some other, because it can't be indoor to do the.
Well, the indoor facility is a possibility where it's located. Unfortunately, the city doesn't have the funds to make it an indoor facility. And that's why it stopped going to Queens also, was the price. It's the price tag. So, where it is not so much the problem as the noise because of where it is. But again, it could have been made a fully indoor facility. We're hoping the sound abatement will be enough so that it doesn't impact on the surrounding communities. And it's much more than just City Island.
Right.
I mean, every
Pelham
waterfront community hears it. Pelham Bay hears it. Country Club hears it. It's heard throughout. Yeah. It's heard throughout the entire community.
Bob, let me get to John Doyle now. John,
sure thing.
I'm looking at materials here that say, let's see, a plan in 2014, a proposal in 2017 that was part of the mayor's preliminary budget. There was, I guess, there's something going on about that came out in 2020. There's a design in place. Is the biggest problem here what Bob Bieder said, funding? I mean, somebody's got to make the commitment to say, let's really do this. Is that where we're at?
Gary, yes. And I just want to echo what both Bob and Barbara said. It is funding, but at the same time, it's transparency. As my other colleagues have said here, the NYPD has been making promises for now 4 mayors. We're about to go on the 5th mayor. A number of council members.
Oh my goodness!
Commissioners come back.
Wait, John. How many borough presidents along the way? You could count that.
Carry on, Diaz, and it will continue to whoever succeeds the current borough president. So 4 there. Okay. So this has been going on for quite some time. As Bob pointed out, this is not cheap or easy to do. The total price tag for this is $224 million, and this is part of the NYPD's 10-year capital plan. It's nearly half the budget of the 10-year capital plan.
Wow.
So we're talking about the highest priced item in that capital plan. And unfortunately, again, we're trying to build trust here. And so we show up at these meetings and, the police sometimes are, and this is not a criticism of rank and file policing. It's a criticism of downtown One Police Plaza and sometimes the lack of transparency we get. They're saying to us, why don't you believe us, whatever. And we're going back on this long history. And the fact of the matter is this capital plan, the $224 million that the three of us have been speaking about, is supposed to go into effect in fiscal year 2023 when the new mayor comes in.
Wait, 2023 when the next mayor? Barbara looked like she wanted to add something to that.
Well, they're talking, originally in 1998, 2.8 million was put into it. So it's quite a big deal to have, over 200 million in it. Years ago, I got a phone call. I made a phone call to the Brian Lehrer show and to when the mayor was on. And I said to him, what about Rodman's Neck? Are you going to put any money into the police budget? And he said, what's Rodman's Neck?
Oh, boy.
So Jimmy Vacca went to bat immediately and got him to a town hall meeting in the Bronx.
He was the former council member, just to be clear.
That's right, exactly. And Jimmy got him to come, put me in the front row, and the mayor came over to me and said, Barbara, there's money in the budget. And for all that he may have made mistakes in other areas, he did put money in the budget. It wasn't nearly enough, as John said, for what they were going to do. But
so here,
there.
Being kind of the de facto moderator here, what I hear and heard from Bob Bieder is that, we need better facilities for our police department. So there's a balance here that it's not like the police department would say, no, we don't want to do that. We don't care about you guys and your noise. We have a reason to want to do that too. And especially now with all the dialogue about policing and the importance of policing and trying to do things right, it would seem that this is the time. So John Doyle, I'm going to say something terrible. There's only 4,500 people in City Island.
Yes.
And when you look at apportioning a $220 million infrastructure project, because these people are complaining, and then you balance that off, you know what I mean, is a political will. I mean, I'm trying to help.
Gary,
I'm not sure how to do it.
But what you said is the exact truth. And look, we're not, no one here on this call is particularly naive. We're a city of 8.5 million people. This is a localized problem, but I think something that we've done through the Precinct Council with Bob's good work, as well as our colleagues, Annie Bowler, Michelle Torioni, Yvonne Burris, and Sonia Feliciano, is we started a Rodman's Neck monitoring committee. Barbara's on that committee. We have people from Edgewater, people from Country Club, people from Spencer Estates, people from Silver Beach, all these different committees that are elevating this issue. So it's not a 4,500 person issue. It's instead now maybe 100,000 person issue. And this is something that it can get wider attention. And the monitoring committee is set up so that we can meet with them hopefully twice a year as this construction goes into effect, and really hold their feet to the fire and make sure we're getting guaranteed promises. And this was written into the memorandum of understanding back in 1993, when they actually alienated the parkland that Barbara referenced earlier between David Dinkins and then Speaker Saul Weprin. So this outdates even Shelley Silver, the former longtime Assembly Speaker.
Wow.
This is something that's been going on for nearly my entire lifetime. And they promised that they will come meet with the 45th precinct. So obviously Barbara had the documents, brought them to me, I brought them to Bob, and we decided to reconstitute this monitoring committee, basically trying to take a page from what you guys have been doing very well in the West Bronx with the Van Cortlandt Park Monitoring Committee, trying to hold people's feet to the fire there so that we can build the political will outward to make this a bigger issue for our region.
I want to go to Bob Bieder then, and let's just review the political will or the political landscape of what is it going to take. Is it there will be a new council member, Velasquez won
Yes,
that election,
presumably, yes.
And so there will be a new council member. What has to happen? It would seem to me the police would want to do this too. That was my earlier point.
Well, the police definitely want to do this.
Yeah.
Gary, let me just say, the police department has gone back to OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, on several occasions, asking to actually double this budget. This $225 million gets them a project, but it doesn't get them a full indoor range, which is what they really wanted. All right. Mm-hmm. But they needed to double the budget for that. And they did go back to Office of Management and Budget and kept requesting it. Now, we all know when it comes to the budget, we're talking the mayor.
Right. So that's
where the buck stops. So literally, that's where the buck stops, is at the office of the mayor. Well, now, the $3.8 million for sound abatement is allocated for a project that's supposed to start in June of 22. The bid for that is in the process right now, being developed and going out for bid very soon. I actually spoke to somebody about that earlier today at PD's construction site, construction agency, and the $3.8 million they suspect is going to be enough for the sound abatement project starting in June of 22. No. Hopefully by next year, by the year after, they'll have sound abatement.
They said by April of 22.
Yeah. By April of 20. Anyway, all right. So that's 2 months.
According to the budget itself, it's showing June of 22. Whether or not they'll actually get done early, I'm always doubtful.
I try to take a step back and evaluate what I'm hearing, and what I'm hearing is the problem with so many other city development projects, no matter how large or small. There's no single plan. There's no this is what we're going to do. I'm hearing 2 million here, 2 million here. The whole thing costs 220 million. To me, these are not solutions. Barbara, I just want to ask you. I know you have something you want to add. I wanted. This was another video that you just went outside the other day and shot. So let's just take a quick look at this, just so people really understand. This is a beautiful pastoral place. The water is clean and silent. There are boats out there. Take a look. Barbara, we talk about building businesses. Among the businesses that were hurt through the pandemic are restaurants. Like all the people here and many of the people who are watching us, they go out to City Island to have a nice lunch on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, bring the family out. It's grandma's birthday, and they do it and they sit out there, and that's what they hear. There's that component as well. If you want to build our businesses and promote stuff, you don't want to have somebody go back to their home in Westchester and say, you know what, that kind of was not really very fun, because it sounded like they were blowing up stuff across the way. So anyway, I'm just making that point that that's another reason why we've got to move this forward. Now, what I saw you had your hand up. What did you want to add to
Well, I was just going to say that there are two different sums of money here. One is to redo the range, which also lead abatement has been another issue that John's been following through on. That apparently does go on. So lead is not an issue now, although it has been in the past. But the police capital budget is the large amount. The smaller amount is something that Jimmy Vacca, then councilman, went to the city council for. And that was for the temporary baffling. And that was really to make the community happy. And that will likely happen by the middle of next year, with all fingers crossed. And of course, looking back at the history, my fingers have been crossed a lot.
For a long time. John.
But the renovation of the entire range isn't really going to happen completed until 2026. That's
right.
It's only 4 more years, 5 more years.
The next mayor.
John, I want to ask you. I want to ask you about this, and I was thinking about this, and I have heard this and read it in individual articles. When you shoot the guns, the rounds are out there. There's got to be lead pollution in the land there. I mean, and as well as the air pollution. I mean, the environmental thing is not only the noise, right? I mean, there are other issues. And what are those issues?
Yeah, I mean, everyone here is involved in environmental protection one way or another. And this has been a constant concern we have, because we foiled for this information through the Precinct Council to share with the larger community. And we actually asked them how, about the wells and everything. And they are not stonewalling, but very much slow walking our FOIL requests, sending us to kind of a hot potato of which agency handles this. And in the last request we put in, they actually told us how many wells there were and which ones were ground wells and which ones were wet water wells and all these other things. And it was funny in the sense of they still didn't give us the readings. They just confirmed what we already knew, that the wells were already there. So it is a very serious issue. And back in the 90s, when Barbara and others were involved in this lawsuit, I do need to point out that the Fishermen's Union was actually involved in that lawsuit, because it was their belief that the shooting in the range would pollute the waterways. So building on your point earlier of economic protection and economic activity, this is a concern. And, it's funny because, people are coming into this now, maybe somebody's watching who is not familiar with the history of 20 years. And they're saying, well, it's been noisy for forever. Why do you guys care? And what I would say to those people, because I think it's very important, is that between 2006 and 2013, 2014, people who moved to City Island bought their homes under the promise from City Hall that this thing was going to be relocated to College Point. That's not fair to them. Furthermore, my family moved to City Island here in 1991. I'm a mussel sucker, not a clam digger. So, I'm still considered
we won't hold that against you, I promise.
I'm still considered an outsider by some. However, my mother even said, and my mother rarely complains about anything, but she pointed out the other day that when we were little and the noise would be pretty bad, you'd close the window, you'd turn on the air conditioner. It was not as much of a concern. Post 9/11, the NYPD needs to train with military weapons. Those weapons are a lot louder now than they were in the early 90s. So we had a promise that this thing was going to be moved, and the issue itself has gotten worse. It's louder now than it was in the 90s.
And that can obviously be confirmed. You brought up another issue, which I was thinking about. Somebody says, I always wanted to live on City Island. It's a beautiful place. I'm assuming that this affects people who would consider buying there. It's got to affect property values. I mean, there is a whole economic, thing that goes with it. Let's go around the room and ask each of you before we run out of time. So we'll start with Barbara. We'll go the same order that we did. What if you were the mayor? What is the answer? Is the answer move the whole thing somewhere else? Is the answer build a real facility here? And what is realistic in terms, I mean, is the 224 million enough, or is that not even adequate? And maybe we should really find, a place out of the city. I mean, what do you see here as your desire, as your ultimate goal? And Bob and John will ask you the same thing.
Yeah, well, as far as the police firing range goes, of course, it would be better placed somewhere else. And it's very expensive to do that. It's also the Rodman's Neck, as John pointed out, is a holy mess. I mean, the sanitation, there's no real plumbing there. There are a lot of things wrong with it and that need to be fixed for the sake of the police, not just us.
Yes, we've talked about that, sure.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. The bomb squad, I believe, should be put somewhere else. We are now given warnings when it's likely to happen, although not always. And I mean, I had a garden party at my house where the garden club came to look at my pretty flowers, and suddenly the whole thing erupts across the way. And so everybody cheered, of course, because it was all fireworks. But on the other hand, not very pleasant. Yeah. And I do think that the city has not been paying any attention to us.
So from your perspective, an indoor facility, but the bomb people have to go elsewhere.
I would like that to happen. I also think that if the temporary baffling is successful, that would be terrific. And I think they ought to get started in that. And there's no reason to have it drag on for another several years. Bob
Bieder, what do you think?
Well, I do believe
we got about 30 seconds for you and then 30 for John.
I believe they're not going to move the location no matter how much you want to make that a wish. But I think the indoor facility is something that they should really take much more seriously. Hopefully, whoever the next mayor becomes will hear that need, because the outdoor facility is just not really the best choice for the police department or anybody else using it. But I also think they need to get some funding from some of the other users that are city, state, federal agencies that are using it.
It's very important to note in this discussion, which I have learned even more so than I was aware of it, the police want it too. It's not a case of the community versus the police. No, exactly. It's a case of police officers saying, you know what, we deserve better as well. John Doyle, you get the final word.
I agree with what's been said. The police deserve a 21st century range. I would point out that in the work in the 90s that Barbara and others did, the NRA wrote a letter saying the only way you're going to really deal with this issue was to fully enclose the range. Probably the only good thing this organization did in its whole work would write this letter that said this. Right now, the range is going to be 80% enclosed, which is better than when in the beginning it was going to be 66% enclosed. They keep fluctuating on that. So if people want to be active, exert pressure on your elected officials, exert pressure on the new mayor coming in, everyone else, to fully enclose this range. When they were going to put it in Queens, they were going to fully enclose this because they knew the people of Queens wouldn't put up with it. People of the Bronx want to be treated better. They have to step up, speak up, come to our monitoring committee meetings, and take a proactive role.
You know what there really is that sums up the whole thing? This is not a political issue. This is an issue because you talked about the NRA, you talked about the police department, you talk about local community people, you talk about environmentalists. They're all saying, you know what, we should get this done. So let's do it. All right. Listen, Barbara Dolensek, thank you so much. She's with the City Island Civic Association, John Doyle of City Island Rising and the Precinct Council, and Bob Bieder, the president of the 45th Precinct Council. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm going to stress one more time. Community Council.
Community Council. Right. Did I not say that? 45th Precinct?
Everybody does it. You're not alone, Gary. I constantly have to remind people we're a community council.
They're telling me we got to go. Thanks to Rebecca and Stephen and our producers, and we'll see you next week. Good night.